Dangling Beam. There was a grim look of determination on the face of Francine Hopkins. Generally, when you saw her, she was full of smiles. The girls at the office where she worked knew she was very happy, and why not? She wore that big engagement ring with pride. It had taken several weeks to make up her mind. Now she was facing Bob Russell. The big husky ex-football star knew something was going to happen, so he awaited it. Francine came right to the point. "I love you, Bob. At the office, they all think I'm the luckiest girl in the world to get a fellow like you. Know something? They're perfectly right. But something has been bothering me. It's your work. Each day while you're away, I worry. I just can't help it. And at night, I get these mixed up dreams. I see you on top of a building. All you have to do is make one false step and down you go. No use fooling myself. It's going to be the same way when we are married. I'll have the dinner waiting and then you'll be late. 1,000 terrible thoughts will go through my mind. I know that big buildings must be erected, and that takes a lot of men willing to do the work. But you don't have to walk on every beam and check up on the men. You're the top man in the Hopkins Construction Company. Why not give yourself a good desk job? It will be easier on you and easier on me." Bob Russell didn't laugh. He knew exactly how this girl felt, for his mother felt the same way when his dad worked for the company. He tried to explain one important fact to Francine. "Did it ever dawn upon you that I never have the slightest worry in the world about my work? If I worried, then I would have to quit. For when confidence falters, then the foot hesitates, and you can slip. Every job in the world has some kind of calculated risk to it. You told me that for 2 summers. You were a lifeguard in a girls' camp. Look at the risks you took. You might swim out to save a girl, and in trying to do so, find you're unable to come back. Or you might get hold of that girl and find you can't break her panic grip. Both of you might drown. Every time you drive your car, you take a risk. So relax, my darling. I love my work, and it gives me a good income. You just stop worrying." "Then that means you'll continue with your work when we're married," half-challenged Francine. "It does," snapped back Bob Russell, who was beginning to lose his temper. Then it happened. Just how was a bit difficult for Francine to remember. One word led to another. She began to cry. Before she knew it, she had taken the engagement ring off her finger and handed it back to the man she loved. He was stunned, but said nothing. When it was over, Francine found herself home alone and still crying. "Oh, what a fool I have been! What happened to me?" she shouted to the 4 walls of her living room. "How could I have done such a thing? When you marry a man, you share his joys and his sorrows with him. If that's his work and he likes it, then why should I complain?" She didn't sleep at all that night. In the morning, she called up the office and told him she wasn't coming in that day. She half-heartedly ate her breakfast. She made up her mind what to do. At 10, she left the apartment and drove her car to Pine and Whitehall Avenues. There, the Hopkins Construction Company was putting up a new office building. The steel framework for the first 12 stories was already in place. She headed for the main office, which was a wooden shack on the side of the street. The door was open, and she saw Bob Russell. "Could you forgive me for being a fool?" she pleaded. He took her in his arms and kissed her. She sniffed a bit and then continued speaking. "If you want me to learn how to walk on beams, I'll do it." Suddenly, both of them heard a loud crash. They dashed outside to see what had happened. Jim Daniels, the foreman, rushed over to Bob Russell. He pointed up to the top of the framework. A beam was dangling in the air with 3 men clinging to it. A delivery truck went out of control and smashed into the boom crane. The top of the crane hit the beams. Those men will fall down and be killed unless we can do something to save them. The situation was critical. The workmen were holding back traffic and roping off the street. Bob Russell had to do some quick thinking. If they tried to move the boom crane, it might smash through all the steel framework. "Get every man out of the construction work," he shouted to Frank Gorman, his assistant. "Get me the police emergency squad. We have the other boom crane on the east side of the building. We must move it here." The police emergency squad arrived in record time. Lieutenant Morton Downer blocked off traffic. Then he set up a loudspeaker unit. "Any advice you want to give the men up there?" he asked Bob Russell. The young man walked quickly over to the microphone. He could see the 3 men still holding on securely to the dangling beam. "Hello up there," he began. "I know it isn't exactly the best place in the world to be, and I'm talking to Mike Perosi, Hi Phillips, and Dan Giorgio. I'm getting the boom crane into position. We'll attach the big bucket to the top, and then we'll swing it up into the air. All you have to do is get into the bucket, and you'll all be brought down safely. Just hold on, and don't waste any precious energy." Frank Gorman and a crew worked feverishly to attach the big bucket to the boom crane. Francine's face was white as she realized how precious the seconds were ticking off her wristwatch. She came up to the side of Bob. "They'll be saved, won't they?" she asked. "If it is within our power to do so, you can be certain we'll get them down. The one fear is that they might start to tire and loosen the grip they have on the beam." The boom crane was now ready to swing into action. Bob walked up to Lou Keller, who was at the controls. "You must avoid touching the other boom," he warned. "Otherwise, everything might start toppling down." Slowly and efficiently, the boom crane began to go higher and higher. It was now level with the dangling beam, but the men didn't try to get into the bucket. "What's wrong?" asked Lieutenant Morton Downer. "Why aren't the men getting into the bucket?" "Tired and frozen to the beam, as we would say," was Bob's reply. "It might look simple down here. All each has to do is climb into the bucket, but that means letting go of the dangling beam. I'll speak to the men up there again. Let me use that microphone." By this time, the news photographers were in action, shooting their pictures of the tense situation. Bob spoke into the microphone. "So, you fellows up there want service? Just hold on a little longer. We'll lower the boom, and then I'll go up and I'll see that each of you are personally escorted into the bucket." Down came the boom crane. Francine rushed over to Bob. She opened her mouth to say something. Then she closed her lips tightly and clenched her fists. She kissed Bob and finally managed to speak. "I know you will save them, darling." Up again went the boom crane. Its single passenger was Bob, and beads of perspiration formed on the forehead of Lou Keller as he handled the controls. The strain was beginning to tell on him. He finally stopped the bucket so that Bob could help the men into it. Mike Perosi was first, and he sank to the bottom of the bucket. Next to be helped into the bucket was Hy Phillips. But Dan Giorgio refused to budge, nor could he say a word. Bob had to think quickly. He sensed that Dan Giorgio was slacking up on his grip, and he made one grab for the right wrist of the man and actually lifted him into the bucket. Then he signaled to Lou Keller to start the downward journey. It was slow, but finally the bucket reached the ground. Willing hands lifted the men out. Then all of a sudden, the entire crowd, consisting of the spectators, the working men, and the photographers, broke into one loud cheer. "A job well done," complimented the police officer. "You've caught nerve." Francine was at Bob's side. He held her hand tightly. Then he spoke. "If I weren't here, what would happen to those men?" "Forgive me," she half pleaded. "I'll never worry anymore. I know you can handle any situation."